There's nothing more satisfying than finding the perfect green paint for your living room. Except maybe popping open that can of Valspar Ultra and rolling that first smooth stroke on the wall. And there's nothing more satisfying than admiring your freshly painted wall.
Ooh.
Except maybe peeling off the painter's tape to see those crisp edges. But the most satisfying part of all? Valspar Ultra's price tag, starting at $29.98 a gallon. Affordable, durable, available at Lowe's. Price varies by Shein.
You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I have the pleasure of speaking with Rachel Fehr today. Did I say your last name right?
It's Fehr.
Fehr. That makes more sense. Rachel Fehr. So welcome, Rachel. Thanks for coming and chatting with me.
Well, thanks for the invite.
You are the 2017 Courage to Come Back Award winner for mental health, and I love having the award winners for mental health on my show. I won in 2022, and it is an incredible honor to be acknowledged for the work that we do. That so often isn't necessarily understood or recognized or even realized. So congratulations on that, even though it's many years past that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. One of the things that you've been dealing with almost your whole life is being misdiagnosed. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So originally, as a teenager, I was diagnosed with depression at age 13. And from there, it went on to an anxiety diagnosis, potentially bipolar, and traits of schizophrenia. And then they landed on a borderline personality disorder diagnosis, which was also false, but I didn't figure that out until I was 42.
Oh my God. How did it come about that you figured that out?
I had a psychologist, my last psychologist, told me that I had every symptom of autism, that everything that's on the DSM criteria. And that's what got me thinking that, but he did not diagnose me with autism. He actually told me I could solve most of my problems by getting a boyfriend.
All right. You told me that. Oh, if only life was so simple.
Right.
You could just have a boyfriend in every corner, hey?
Oh, yeah.
But you did something really novel, and that's the thing that I really want to talk about. You went to school. You took yourself to school to learn about psychology, to help yourself figure out how to help yourself.
I did. The more I learned about borderline personality disorder, the more I realized I didn't actually have it. The diagnosis never actually rang true for me. And I had taken a couple years of psychology in high school. When I was in school, they offered college level courses. And from there, as an adult, I started to attend mental health summits because I couldn't keep a doctor because they didn't really have much left to teach me at that point. And through the mental health summits and through the Embrace Autism website, which has all of the assessments for the autism assessment on the website, I discovered that I actually have level 1 autism.
Wow.
And borderline personality disorder is the most common diagnosis for women with level 1 autism.
The most common misdiagnosis. Is that what?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And I've heard that so many times. In fact, so many times I hear about people being misdiagnosed with borderline, either too quickly or just inappropriately, or honestly, with the work I do around therapy, abuse, and exploitation, it's often because the abusive therapist is looking for a way to discredit their client who might tell on them. So it is a terrible diagnosis, and it's too often misapplied. And so I'm hoping that you have managed to move away from that, and people are recognizing that you are autistic as opposed to BPD.
Well, I've just started telling people, like, if I'm in a situation where I may become overstimulated, I just tell them up front, like, if this happens, I'm going to need to step away and take a moment to regulate how I'm feeling. And that's gotten me a lot further than not talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason level 1 autism is so often misdiagnosed in women is women are taught at a much younger age to internalize their struggles.
Mm.
And the majority of autism research is based on white men. They
The
didn't,
majority of research is based on white men,
yes.
period.
So a lot of POC and women often struggle in getting a correct diagnosis because there's been next to no research on how it presents in women, which is drastically different than the way it presents in men. Women are taught to be mild and meek and be ladylike. And so we often, more often than not, internalize our symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that is also goes along with masking?
Well, that's exactly what it is. We're
Okay.
taught to mask at a much earlier age because it's acceptable for boys to be loud and boisterous and have, tempers, whereas it's not where society expects women to be the opposite.
It's true. That is very, very true. Um, I met you at the 2025 Courage to Come Back Awards. And there they were talking about work you were doing around dismantling stigma around mental health. Can you talk a little bit about that work?
Yeah, so I do a lot of this is mostly when I'm out in the community. Due to a car accident a few years ago, I now have a service dog, which tends to spark conversations with random people. And so I like to take those opportunities to kind of educate people on the differences and just spread awareness. And I've had a great deal of success. It's just amazing how little people actually know about how mental health presents, especially within women, because, especially with autistic women, our special interests tend to be socially acceptable. And so that tends to get missed because they're like, oh, you're just an artist or you're artistic or you're this or you're that, when in reality, it's actually a special interest that dominates the majority of my time.
Right.
Fortunately for me, my special interest is learning. And so through that,
Hmm.
I was able to discover more about myself and learn how to manage my symptoms and basically learn how to treat myself.
And that's an amazing thing, really, when you say it very calmly and sort of matter of factly, but it takes an incredible brain to be able to be objective enough about what you're experiencing, to be able to apply what you've learned to a treatment idea, and to then assess it and see whether is this working, is it not working, should I do something different, should I, and do those measured kind of outcomes on something that most people can't get objective enough away from their own self to be able to do. How were you able to do this?
Um, Lots and lots of meditation, mindfulness practice,
Mm.
but also through dialectical behavioral therapy, which honestly I think would be helpful for everyone, not just people with mental health. So, through dialectical behavioral therapy, one of the tools that you're taught is called shaping, and it's shaping is when you take a coping technique and you change it to work for you, to work better for you.
Can you give me an example?
Um, oh, that's a tough one. Um, Well, for instance, like when you're overstimulated and you're trying to calm down, so there's multiple methods. Number one is meditation, but not everybody's able to quiet their mind long enough to meditate. So instead of trying to meditate for half an hour, do it for 30 seconds, reset yourself, do it again. And through that practice, you can extend it, but it makes it doable.
Mm.
So you basically take the technique and you break it down. So, if there's aspects of one technique that work for you, but other aspects of that technique don't work for you, just do the ones that work for you.
Right. That's reasonable.
It's kind
I
of
th
take what works and leave what doesn't.
and we all should be doing that all the time. Like that, like there shouldn't be any other rule about what you do except that rule. You are an incredible person, and there's no doing an interview with you is sort of like, okay, what part of this amazing person's life should I pick? And I really don't want to just pick. I mean, one of the other things that is true for you is that you had a personal issue and you decided that the laws needed to change and you proceeded to change them. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I was married to a person who did not have a conscience.
Ouch.
So the old DSM term would be sociopath.
Hmm.
And when I finally was able to, it took some planning, but I was able to get away with my children, despite domestic violence laws not being helpful. Um, and then, but I was married to him, and you can't get a divorce unless you have a process server serve the person in person. And that needed to change because that's often detrimental to the safety of battered women, because then you have to have an address for service and you can't use social media. And it took me about 7 years to find a judge that I was able to convince. And based on the issue of safety and a combination of the fact that he was a drug addict without a permanent address,
Right.
I was able to convince the judge to allow me to serve him on Facebook
And
through
so was that
Facebook
like
Messenger.
a messenger? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so basically, I just took photos of all the documents, and my lawyer just sent a message through Facebook Messenger.
Wow. And that worked. That
Yeah.
is very cool. And so when you were saying the divorce laws, the whatever the parameters of that aren't very useful to somebody or helpful to somebody who is afraid for their safety. Was this back when was this? Is this something current or is this a while ago
Oh,
or
this was, oh dear. I got married in 2004, so this was, I believe, 2011.
so only 14 years ago?
Yeah.
Do you think the laws have changed a lot since then, besides the one that you managed to get changed?
Well, now that you can serve them on social media. So because the judge gave me permission, that set a precedent.
Hmm.
And so now everyone can do it because the courts can't say yes to one person and no to another.
That's right. That's
So
right.
whenever you have a new precedent, that precedent becomes the new law.
And part of why this is important is that if you serve somebody, if for instance, then if you are somebody who's serving without a lawyer, in that service document, you have to provide the address which they can reply to, right? And so
So
by virtue of having to serve them and having that address, you are in fact outing yourself about where you live. And if you are in danger, doing that is a very dangerous thing to do, not just for yourself, but for your children.
yeah, so now you can actually use an email address as an address for service, or you can use a lawyer's office, but divorce law, but to get a divorce, you cannot get legal aid for divorce.
No,
And also, you can't just have anybody serve divorce papers. So prior to my divorce, it had to be a process server. And at that time, they were charging $250 per attempt.
right.
So if
And
they attempt to serve and they fail to serve, you still have to pay that 250 and then you have to pay it again. So it's financially, which made it financially impossible to get a
mhm.
divorce.
Especially if somebody doesn't really have a fixed address and they're moving around a lot, that would make it very difficult. So thank you on behalf of all battered women everywhere in Canada, BC,
All of
all,
Canada. It's
all of Canada.
so divorce is federal. It's only done in Supreme Court.
Right, right.
And so because I was granted permission by a Supreme Court judge, that means it's a precedent for the entire country.
Well, thank you on behalf of all battered women everywhere in Canada
Well,
for,
we needed other options,
yes, we
and
did.
I was too stubborn to let him win. I wasn't going to allow him to force me to be tied to him for the rest of my life.
Hmm. But this is a signature of yours in that you don't come up against a rule that's not working and just go, oh, well, I guess I can't. You come up to them and go, how else can I change this? Or how else can I do this so that I can get better or I can heal regardless of whether or not, I mean, it's one of the things about you that is so remarkable. Where are you going now with your desire to help and reduce stigma and there's some work that you were looking at doing to help men.
Yeah, so there aren't enough resources for women, but there's even fewer resources for men. And through my dad's work in pouring sweat lodge and helping people in addiction and helping people coming out of prison, and he goes into the prisons to pour sweat. These men who are spending most of their adult lives in prison, they get let out, they spend 3 months in a halfway house, and then they get kicked to the curb with no support, no life skills, no budgeting skills, or anything like that. And then, especially for Indigenous men, reconnecting with their culture oftentimes gives them a greater chance of success in turning their lives around.
Mm.
So I'm hoping to find some financial backers. I would like to start a traditional medicine farm that includes second stage housing for Indigenous men coming out of halfway houses. Because you've got these men who are working so hard, who want so badly to turn their lives around, but when they've spent 18 out of their 20 adult years in jail, they don't have the skills to survive in the world.
I know, and then
And
they're
so,
coming out dealing with the colonial concept of what success
exactly.
is and
So my idea for the program actually came from Norway's prison model.
mm,
So Norway has actually, with their current prison model, has reduced recidivism rates from 80% to 17%,
oh my God.
simply by providing therapy. In their prisons, they only supply one meal a day, but within the prison, there's actually a grocery store, and every prisoner has a job and they buy their own food. They're taught how to shop, they're taught how to budget. And they don't live in cells, they live in blocks with other men, which is more like an apartment with multiple rooms, and they have their own kitchen and they cook their own meals. So they're taught how to cook, they're taught how to budget, and it made a huge difference in the amount of people who reoffended. They've actually had to close probably, I believe, half of their prisons as a result of this model.
And when you talk about, I love Norway. I love Norway, but for so many reasons. But now I love Norway for this reason. When you talk about a traditional medicine farm, you're talking about an indigenous traditional farm, and you talked about your dad. So where are you from, Rachel?
So I'm from Canada. So when I say my dad, I mean my adopted dad.
Hmm.
My biological dad committed suicide when I was very young. And in my early 20s, I started attending a sweat lodge run by a gentleman named Old Hands. And him and his wife, Anna Hui, decided that I didn't have parents, so they were going to be my parents.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Now, my dad is a medicine man and my mom is a medicine woman, and I've been learning a great deal from them. So rather than use traditional medicine, which oftentimes doesn't work for me, I've learned how to use different medicines. For instance, bear root is good for treating asthma. Breathing in the smoke from bear root actually opens your lungs just like an inhaler does. And soap berries are a good source of iron. So iron supplements that you get from the pharmacy, your body can only process about 10% of what you're taking in, and the rest just kind of like builds up in your body and can cause long-term problems.
Hmm.
But if you eat a spoonful of soap berries once a day for 10 days, it brings your iron levels back to normal and your body processes 100% of it.
That's interesting. I did not know that. And I
All
take iron.
pharmaceutical medicine comes from indigenous medicine.
Mm-hmm.
It's all based on plants. I can't remember the name of it, but there's a plant that produces a substance that has the same effect as morphine. And you can
Well,
make your own aspirin out of willow bark.
wow. Interesting. So
Yeah.
traditional medicine farm to assist men coming out of prison, second stage housing.
Well, second stage housing. So, you put in 10 hours a week on the farm. You help with the growing of the plants. You learn about the medicine. You learn about your culture. And part of that time would be spent in cooking classes, learning how to cook meals together as a group to have
Mm-hmm.
that social structure. Because you can't just treat the illness and just teaching the skills alone isn't enough. You also need a community.
Right. And it
So
is
this
true.
would be more of a holistic approach.
Right. And where would this farm be situated and how close are you to getting
If
this up?
I can find the backing, there's actually a property I have in mind that's available for sale. It's a nice chunk of farmland here in Surrey that is close enough to a bus stop so that these gentlemen could still go and have a regular job as well.
Mm-hmm. And how much funding are you looking at needing?
Well, the property, I believe, is about $9 million,
Right.
but it's 28 acres. And then there would be the cost. So for the living situation, because it is farmland within the agricultural land reserve, I had the idea of building a barn, making the top half of the barn as rooms, and then have an industrial kitchen downstairs with a living area and a community area, and possibly expanding to have an event center there as well so that it could be a self-sustaining program.
Right. That sounds wonderful, Rachel. I have no doubt you will pull it off whatsoever.
We'll see, because the way I figure it'll take about 20 million to get it off the ground.
Well, 20 million is not that much money in today's world. So we will just imagine $20 million landing in your lap.
Just put it out in the universe, and if it's
Absolutely.
meant to happen, it will happen. That's the other thing too, is I just got tired of getting let down, so I just choose to believe if something's meant to happen, all I got to do is have the faith and it'll happen.
Absolutely. It is the only way one can live one's life, believing that how things happen are the way they are meant to happen. So,
Yeah, and reducing your expectations, because, oftentimes we have unrealistic expectations, or people don't, meet what we want to happen. So it's radical acceptance, basically. The
mhm,
situation is what it is.
right.
If it's going to work, it's going to work. If it's not going to work, well, then I'm going to go find something else.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Thank
if I
you.
can't find what I want, then I'll make my own opportunity. I've been told I'm never going to succeed my whole life. I was always told I was stupid. I had my family telling me I was missing that piece that makes you human.
Oh God.
Yeah.
How would they ever get there with you? I can't even imagine, honestly.
And I got tired of it, and I just decided, you know what? You think I can't do it? Watch me.
Hmm.
And instead of getting angry, I chose to be spiteful. And, well, you think I won't succeed? Okay, let's try this.
Right.
And I don't do it to shove it in their faces. Like, I don't go back and go, hey, I did this, I did that. But, you said I wouldn't achieve anything. Well, to date, I've won the Courage to Come Back awards as well as the Canada 150 medal.
Hmm.
And other things. And I just choose to live in the moment.
Right. Well, you're doing it all right. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll be right back.
CFRO has the most reggae and Caribbean music of any station in the Vancouver area. Start your week off with some reggae oldies on Tuesdays from 10:30 a.m. to noon with Level the Vibes. Roots Reggae is on Fridays from midnight to 7 a.m. The Reggae Show from 6 to 8:30 p.m. every Saturday, followed by Caribbean Sounds from 8:30 to 11 p.m. On the first and second Saturday of every month, it's a Reggae Extended Mix from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. and then Super Mix on the third, fourth, and fifth Saturday on CFRO 100.5 FM, Vancouver Cooperative Radio.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox. Rethreading Madness is coming up to its 6th anniversary of being on air. We produce and air each week out of CFRO 100.5 FM on the unceded traditional territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. RTM was one of the first radio programs to focus on mental health issues here in Canada, in an area swamped with statements from therapists rooted in colonial ideas about mental health and trained in the DSM. RTM works to ensure that the voices of those with lived experience have agency and opportunity to define who they are and what is true for them. Who listens to us? Beyond those with lived experience, our audience includes their friends and partners, along with therapists, counselors, and students of psychology. Since 2022, all of our programs have been uploaded to the Mental Health Radio Network and can be downloaded from all podcast platforms. So if this show was of interest to you, you might find the rest of our programs informative as well. You can find them by searching for Rethreading Madness wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Tanuyap. Kuiget Yuans Kuinsna. Hi everybody, my name is Kuiget Yuans. I'm a member of the Squamish Nation and the Yagalanas clan of the Haida Nation. You're listening to Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We live, work, play, and broadcast from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations.
Oh, you hear this? A lot of people call this rock and roll swings. This is done with the, let's see, with the left hand, yeah. And the right hand fits in with something like this here. Here we go now.
Yeah, it's called rock and roll, and you can hear all about it on Rock Talk. Discover the hidden but enchanting side of the music. Friday mornings at 9 o'clock.
Oh, if that isn't enchanting, nothing is. Go ahead, kids. Dance. Go crazy.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I get the pleasure of talking with David Chalk. I met David Chalk at the 20 to 25 Courage to Come Back Award Gala, where he was given an award for mental health. David lives with dyslexia, ADHD, and something called pragnuh. I think I may have said that very slowly, but maybe correct. I did look it up and I did practice on how to say it, but I'm not sure I said it right. David believed with the belief about himself that he would never succeed. And it was something that was instilled in him by the school system and all of those who live with disabilities, whether they're physical or emotional disabilities, often face the same thing. But David had something that not everyone has. He had a mother who always believed in him. So welcome, David.
Welcome. Good to hear your voice again, and thank you for having me on your show today.
My pleasure. Can you start by describing for our audience what dyslexia, ADHD, and prosopagnosia are and how they impact on a child in school?
Oh my God. Okay, sure. I'm sure many of your listeners have it themselves or in their family. It's probably, if you put all those together, 30% of all people have either one or most. Prosopagnosia, the last one, is the most complicated and complex. Very rare, but it is the inability to recognize the human face. Our brain can do many magical things, and one of them is it can have an unlimited amount of memories for recognizing people and the emotion and the look on the face. We believe nature put it in place so that a baby could recognize the mother with all the different facial looks it could give them, because to someone not understanding, that might look like a different person. Well, that one is enough to throw me into a loop most of the time. I can see someone and 10 minutes later I don't recognize them. I recognize voices quite well, but you can imagine what it's like in the business world. So that one has really, kicked me in the gut a few times. ADHD is a way in which the brain is very active. It's hyperactivity for the most part, but it doesn't have to be hyperactivity. We tend to focus very hard. We tend to need constant excitement in our life. Most people, Richard Branson would be a good example of someone with ADHD and dyslexia, because we are risk takers. Very common in entrepreneurs. My God, probably 40% of all entrepreneurs have it, because it drives you to want to do things. Now, dyslexia, which is a term we do hear quite often for learning disabilities, isn't really a thing. What it is a name given to a child that can't seem to learn to read for whatever reason. And the reason really behind that is what we call neurodiversity. Neurodiversity means prosopagnosia, ADHD, dysgraphia. There's about 100 things that can be wrong with the brain that has it not wired properly. These are not mental deficiencies. They are just a different way of wiring the brain. And it so happens that in the first years of school, grade 1 to 3, we are taught to read. 1 to 3 is taught to read, 3 to 12 is read to learn. Now, a child going into school prior usually has a pretty good childhood. They're curious, they're happy, they're joyful, they play. They walk into the classroom and now there is demands on them, peer pressure, feedback, children, all sorts of activity. About 50 to 60% of them get anxiety. It is very natural. We all get anxiety. But when you're only 5 or 6 years old and it triggers you hard, it actually shuts down a part of the brain that is required to learn to read. And if you are already a little bit neurodivergent and that anxiety kicks in, well, then the likelihood of learning to read drops off by about 80%. That's who I was. And that's what happens to about 54 to 56% of all children in North America.
So all children, not just ones that live with a disability of some kind.
No, and this is what makes it so interesting, because there's a couple ways you can go into grade 1. You've had an incredibly good life and you transition in and you may or may not get anxiety. You could have had a difficult home life, so you're already one step backwards going to the classroom, and you're much more likely to have a setback, a trauma experience. And then there is the learning divergent, which do have a wiring condition, and they are highly likely, about 80% likely, to have a fight or flight response happen. The interesting thing is, in the numbers, about 20 to 30% of children are neurodivergent one way or another. Yet nearly 60% of children fail to learn to read, or literally fail through the education system, indicating one more time that it is the environment. The fight or flight response for survival triggers cortisol and adrenaline. Brain kind of shuts down. We want to get out of there, and learning becomes secondary.
It's interesting because I have a child who has ADHD and probably mild autism. It's actually my grandchild, but I've been raising her. And she could speak in full sentences at 9 months, but she couldn't read. And by the time she hit, halfway through grade 2, she still couldn't read. She still couldn't get the idea. And we were taught that it was probably because of her not thinking in terms of a word, but thinking in terms of sentences. But now what you're telling me makes sense, because she actually didn't learn to read in school. She learned to read by video games.
Yes, and you kind of hit it there. Let me just give you the quick overview, because I'm sure many people in your audience would love to understand this. We learn through sound pattern recognition. Think of a child from early ages, like 8 months or so, up to grade 5 before they go into school. They learn more than 4,000 to 5,000 words, nouns, adjectives, pronouns. They haven't been taught anything. They know how to conjugate a verb, run, running, have run. Th- Everything came from what we call pattern recognition, or the other term for it is statistical learning. When you go into the classroom, what you are required to do is take the sounds you learned and put them on paper, record them, and then lift them off the paper. That is the most complicated thing for a human brain to do. There's no circuitry. So we have to learn this pattern symbol relationship. Just under half children do pick it up, but any neurodivergency errors on the side of I want it to be a sound and I don't want to attach it to a symbol, which is a letter of the alphabet.
Right.
So you saw that. So many parents say they were wonderful before they went to school. And then all of a sudden, it's as if they lost half their, I don't want to say intelligence, because it's not intelligence, their inability to learn. And that is it, because the brain can't do it. And if for any reason, fight or flight, which is our need to survive, it overacts, it puts these hormones in the body, and those hormones are basically telling the brain, after millions of years of evolution, we don't need to think about this. You need to get the heck out of there.
Right.
And that numbness or that lack of oxygen it gives to the frontal cortex is enough to have reading not uptake. And that underlies everything.
It's interesting. As I've always known that video games were the thing that solved this problem for her. And once she learned to read, once she figured that out, she went from, being in grade 2 to reading at a grade 4 level by the end of it, to reading at a grade 8 level by the time she finished elementary school, to reading at a university level by the time she hit grade 9. So it was just finding the way that she learned and allowing that to be and not impose some other form of learning on her.
Well, you actually solved it another way too. The fact that she accelerated so much, I think parents should know this. When you go into fight or flight, you've got cortisol and adrenaline. When you go into curiosity and excitement, you have dopamine and acetylcholine. You know one way you trigger that? A video game.
Oh,
Now,
interesting.
when you trigger dopamine, you excite the brain to want to learn. If you start to integrate learning or reading into that, the dopamine and acetylcholine continue to occur. And now reading actually does that. So you answered the question and you solved the problem. Excitement, attention, and focus drive dopamine. That drove her to want to learn to read. Reading became excited and she accelerated. Literally, you were balancing the neurochemicals of the body without most people knowing it and resolving the entire reading and literacy problem yourself.
Well, I wish I could take credit for it. I would have to give it all to her. My only job was to not let anybody talk me out of letting her play video games. So anyways,
you supported her.
I did. I always do. So is my job. So you ended up graduating from school, having had these disabilities all the way through. Were you able to read by the time you finished school?
No, not at all. When I was tested at 62, I read at a grade 3 level. And when I was graduating high school, I was called into the counselor's office and I was told, David, people like you end up on welfare, on the street, in jail, or dead. You don't have much of a future because you can't learn. They had no idea what was causing me not to learn. The science wasn't there back then. It is there today with things I just told you. But this is what children go through. Fortunately, as you said, I had a mother who would not quit like you. She supported me with unconditional love. And with that, as I told you, when you get the brain chemicals moving into an excited mode of belief in oneself, you can do anything, regardless of whether you can read.
And you did do anything. Because you did not fulfill your principles' ideas of what was true for you. You ended up being actually highly successful, even though you couldn't read after leaving school and very quickly after leaving school. So can you tell folks about that?
Yeah, the first thing I did right after graduating, well, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer, but I wouldn't be able to get into university. So I thought, okay, rather than fly rockets, I'll fly planes. So I became an airline pilot. My ADHD kicked in. I couldn't sit in the cockpit. So I thought, okay, technology's moving. I'll get into computers. They were new. I bought an Apple II computer. I took it apart. I saw how they worked, started building them, and I created, the company went, well over $100 million. I had a few companies like that. just did it out of passion and desire. But I want to make it clear for parents who have children who are suffering reading, it is not intelligence. It is how the brain is working and wired. I have lots of knowledge and educational components that I can tell parents how they can get around it. The one thing to know, you could have one of the most brilliant children on the planet, Einstein, Edison, Picasso, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, they all have these issues, except they got support the right way. So if there's one thing I can tell your listeners, if you have a child suffering in school, I actually bet if we look down the road and you support that child the right way, they've got an incredible future awaiting them in the world of technology.
Yeah, I do believe that we have some weird ideas about what success is and who can do what. And I always like those stories about, somebody coming along who was expected not to do anything and ended up being, just as you said, brilliant and doing incredible things, like somebody who's in a vegetative state who was given a computer finally and wrote an award-winning screenplay. Those
By
things.
thinking it, yes.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So you became an entrepreneur, you created several businesses, you were highly successful, but you still couldn't read.
That's right. Reading is a way of bringing information in. But we said at the beginning, sound is another way to do it. So I learned through sound. I listened. I spoke. That's why I do a lot of speaking. Reading is just extracting information off a page that has been stored there. Now, the ability to read can make life wonderful because you can power through information. You can read contracts easy. You can do all sorts of things, but it does not limit creative thinking. So for me, it did not hold me back. Yes, I felt like a fraud. I carried trauma and shame at levels people can't even comprehend. But I hadn't lost my self-esteem. And with that, I just pushed forward and said, damn the torpedoes. You can't read. You don't even know what that sign says, but you can probably go build one.
True. All of that is true. So where did you go from there? Like, at what point did you, because you now know how to read.
Oh God, I read voraciously. I love reading. I wish people would understand that when you solve the problem of reading, you open up a portal to the world of excitement. Oh, I love it. And I loathed it before. What happened was COVID. I was doing consulting, coaching, business mentoring, public speaking, and all of those went down the toilet. I was 62 years old. We didn't know where the world was going. And I thought, I need to solve what's wrong with me. And I got tested and I was told I have all these issues wrong with me. And I contacted someone who said, there's a gentleman in the US, John Cochran. He's a very famous man who has dyslexia, and he's creating a documentary. And they can't find any adult that is willing to show that they can't read on camera in public. And they believe they can teach you how to read. And if you want to do it in front of a camera, there's a Hollywood production. It was called The Truth About Reading, or is The Truth About Reading. If you will do that, you have the opportunity to learn to read. Well, I had nothing to lose. And I crossed the border during COVID. I had to get special clearance. I flew to Michigan. I had a private tutor, and they taught me a way of reading that is never taught, is unknown. It is almost like a secret code. And with that, within 11 hours, I read at a post-university level.
Yeah, that's just, I heard that the night of the gala as you said it, and I thought, oh my God, that's an incredible statement. Can you share with us how that happens?
Yes, I will, because I'll give it to you another way. We are electrochemical machines. We are run by hormones and chemicals, as I said earlier about your granddaughter. The most powerful thing in our brain is the amygdala. It is fight or flight. It looks for safety, and it's constantly firing, having us on edge. Well, as I said, for anyone that's got a difficulty, that isn't going to cross over the other way. But what I did say is that we learn through patterns, and that was where the magic was, because my brain could not take reading in the way another normal person could. I was overloading. But the area of a brain called the pattern recognition area is where the knowledge goes when we learn guitar, piano, chess, extreme sports, anything that is pattern related. Well, lo and behold, the English language is a friggin' pattern. 26 letters, 44 sounds. If we learn it not as reading, but learn it as sound, and then you are given examples of how you take that sound and code it onto the page, which is spelling, the rate of learning is so fast. And because it was done one-on-one with tutoring and it was happening quickly, I was so excited. I went into a state called flow, which is hyper learning. And literally by the hour, by the fourth hour, I broke down because I could feel it, not physically, but emotionally going into my brain. By the 11th hour, we had gone through hundreds of words, coding them onto the page. When they gave me a book to read, I didn't see it like a bunch of letters. I saw it as patterns that I could pull together very quickly. And the reading, well, that was it. I came home after that and went, okay, something happened there and I got to figure that out, solve it for the rest of the world.
So can you give me an example of a pattern?
Yeah. A pattern is a chair, because any chair is a chair, and a table or a tree or a cat or a dog. We learn it because we have what's called an extraction of it. Our brain understands what it is. When it comes to words, and they are made up of symbols, of letters, every time you change the order of the symbols, you have a new meaning. The brain doesn't like that. It wants to see a symbol a certain way. When we are young, patterns are the repetition of a parent saying, or a guardian saying certain words under certain conditions. It's how we learn about nature. It's how we learn everything in our life, except reading breaks the mold. Every time you change the pattern, it has a different meaning. And that is the dilemma, and that is the crisis, that when we teach reading, we teach it as memorization. The brain cannot memorize thousands of words. You are taught, look at the word, sound it out, and put it in your memory. Well, some children can do that to various degrees. But when you completely flip it the other way around, and you don't look at what the word is, but you say the word. We know hundreds of words. We work on the words we know, and we learn how to code them onto the page. It changes everything. Science proves it. Neuroscience, fMRI machines, the ones that scan your brain and lighting up areas, they can see that the pattern recognition understanding is going to the same part of the back of the brain where complex things, as I said, like chess and piano. Think about it. If you play guitar, you don't even know what your fingers are doing half the time. Right. Or piano, you're playing chords. They're 10 times. Typing. My God. I should use that example more often. But think about a touch typist. If you ask them how they do it, they go, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I type 160 words a minute, and okay. I don't even have to think. And it is patterns. It is all of that stuff that you're talking about.
For that example, because I type at about 7 words a minute, okay. Pick and pack. And I've never truly taken the time to learn the patterns. You did. And look at the power it gives you. It doesn't matter what you're typing. You don't even have to think about it. That is a region of the brain called the basal ganglia, which is the technical term for it. And when we teach by pattern, and there is focus, and there's attention, and there's an excitement about doing it, there's no limit. 140 or more, you are an exceptional typer. And you are using the exact part of the brain that I am putting reading into. So imagine some child, neurodiverse, dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, that triggers that part of the brain, learns to read through pattern recognition, they can do it. And that's how, as an adult, 11 hours. A child, it's going to be a couple of weeks or a month, and then we're going to move along with them and get them into more advanced language. But that is the power of it. The brain is an amazing machine. Mm-hmm. When we use it the right way, we can do amazing things with it.
Yes. Well, reading is so important in our world. So you have taken your own life experience and your own experience putting together businesses that are highly successful, and your public speaking and mentoring and coaching, and you've packaged it all together into creating an infrastructure to help other people learn to read in the way that you did. Can you talk a little bit about that?
It's a big endeavor. I have a good friend of mine that has been in AI like me for decades, and Kevin Bobrowski. When I got back from learning to read, I said to him, Kevin, something changed. I didn't understand about the brain the way I'm telling you. I had to learn and read. I went down to Stanford, did everything I could. And I said, you know what happened? When they taught me pattern recognition, that's how you actually teach AI. You teach it patterns. You've seen how they give it cats and dogs and words. And then the most important thing they do is they correct it right away. They make sure the AI doesn't get a wrong inference. Well, when I had the tutor there, she corrected me immediately. That doesn't happen in the classroom. So as we started putting 2 and 2 together and 10 and 20 together, we found about 40 things that didn't happen in the classroom. And we realized the 2 most important things are you must teach pattern recognition. You need one-on-one tutoring for that. And you must be emotionally empathetic and understanding and have a safe environment. Well, those 2 things we can do with AI. We can teach AI to understand human emotion in the eyes, the face, the voice, the dilation of the eyes. We're programming that into it. The pattern recognition, we look at the language and we break it down into the patterns. And because I learned how to do it, we program the AI on that. I'm building out the technology. We've done all the basics of it. I still need to raise another $2 million to do it. But when we've done it, we will be able to deploy it like getting water into your home or electricity globally, that anyone with an internet connection will be able to learn to read with emotionally attentive AI on a pattern recognition basis that will meet them exactly where they are, communicate with them in multiple languages if they don't already speak English. And for probably 80% of the world, we can give it to them for free. Impoverished, those in prison, those veterans, those in war-torn countries.
Oh my
For
God.
North America, there's some people that can afford $47 and they'll pay for it. But this is transformative. Reading is not a subject for the classroom. It is a skill. We're not saying school isn't the most important thing there is, because you need to learn. But if you don't know how to read, you can't learn or you don't want to learn. We're like
Yes.
scaffolding.
Yes.
We'll teach a child that is 4 to 5 years old how to read at a grade 4 level by the time they're in grade 1. When they go to school, they'll have the most enjoyable, wonderful experience of learning that any child could have. Everyone's on an equal playing field.
Does this just teach English?
Well, yes, and that's part of it. Down the road, it might do many things, but we've got 700 million people on the planet Earth that are suffering trying to learn English. In North America alone, 180 million people.
Oh my God.
And all of them reading below grade 6 can barely read a book to their children. So we have a massive development here to do English, but it will understand 80 other languages and bring them over to English.
Wow.
We're not teaching other languages because English has now become the de facto language of science, technology, artificial intelligence, transportation, airlines, communication. So other people can do it. We'll show them how to make the technology. I want to get it in children's hands before they go to school and stop the suffering and trauma that occurs.
That's wonderful. So if people want to know more about what you're doing, how can they reach you?
Well, the technology is not available yet. It is called Reading Road. And there's not really a website that has, technical specifications of it, but it's readingroad.ai because it is artificial intelligence. I'll give you my email address if they contact you. Most people think I'll never respond to them, but I do. Parents who are worried, concerned, not just about what I'm building, but how they can help their children. My email address is David, my first name, Chalk, my second name. So David at Chalk, and then Corp, C-O-R-P, David at chalkcorp.com. Email me. You'll be surprised. You'll hear back from me. I do this out of passion and love and desire, because I learned, unfortunately, what hell can be like when you don't fit in.
Yeah.
And you don't suffer in those early grades from trauma and you learn to read. Reading is a symptom. Those who can't read have difficult lives. If you look at the incarceration, 80% of all incarcerated people read below grade 3. It's called the pipeline to prison. So when we see reading falling off, we know there's trauma. What we have to do is pick the reading up so self-esteem comes up. The negative thoughts about themselves start to go away and they contribute to life. They become curious. And again, if they're neurodivergent, they have a possibility of being some of the most creative and intelligent contributors.
Absolutely. I so agree with that. That is so true. And $2 million is really, in this day and age and in this world, is really nothing. So let's hope that 2 million shows up in your bank account.
I don't minimize it, but yes, you're hearing tens of millions, hundreds of millions. It's because we know what we're doing. It's very focused. We can build it with AI. And again, this is going to be so robust in the prisons. Our first prison test will be San Quentin. So understand how serious this is and the level to which we have to build it.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David. I so appreciate you coming and chatting. That award you received is so well deserved. I am happy to have you on and chatting about this. So I look forward to hearing about it, hitting it out there and helping people. Thank you.
I received it for all those other people that deserve it.
I understand that. Thank you, David.
Join Ganarji with guest hosts every Monday from 1 to 2:30 in the afternoon. When Spirit Whispers is where we explore treaties in BC, residential school stories, foster care, and ideas about truth and reconciliation in Canada, plus news on the news.
Yo, stop what you're doing when you listen to me, because you might believe what you hear and see, and what you don't believe is that which makes you free.
Don't miss this great opportunity to become familiar with your First Nations people and the very pride that has kept us strong. When Spirit Whispers, Mondays at 1 p.m.
Yo, open up your mind like a trap design. Yeah, I catch what I'm saying like a trap in line. See, there's more than you, and there's more than me, and there's plenty more in line if you don't believe. And if you need some more convincing, spend the night alone in a residential school building. Sometimes the lights go out on their own.
And that's our show. My thanks to the Courage to Come Back award winners, Rachel Fehr and David Chalk, who demonstrate every day that we are not defined by a mental health diagnosis and are able to continue to do extraordinary things in our lives that benefit so many. And to our listeners, our thanks for joining us today. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further from knowing what the hell I'm gonna do, when I can't seem to find my way under or over or through, just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright. such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or some